This is part 10 of the Craftsman Emerson Gen 4 Rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 9, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we'll be assembling the power panel and the motor. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. In the description section below, I have a link to this wiring diagram, and we will be concentrating on just this part of the power panel. And I have a link to some other stuff as well that's going to help you out as we move along in this video. So here we're going to be assembling the power panel. We have the power panel here and we're inserting the power cord. I decided to reuse the existing one rather than put a new one on because this one was in good shape. And you have the plastic wire stress relief that just snaps on to that cord. And then we'll pull it back through the panel. Now notice how the top 90-degree angle of the panel, we're doing all the wiring on this side of the panel, so make sure you've got it oriented correctly when you first insert this. All right, pretty simple. Next, we've got the wire retaining clip. A lot of times this is missing or broken. It's not necessary. You can utilize that hole that this snaps into and maybe drill another hole below it and then run a zip tie through those two holes to hold the wiring in place. And next we have the power receptacle. And that's going to go through the front of the panel, or the face of the panel. And you're going to want the ground on the bottom. So as I'm holding it, it's towards me will be the bottom. And that just snaps in there like that. All right, so next we've got the two screws and nuts that are for the ground, the two grounds that we have here. So we'll start those two screws, and with this fresh coat of paint I have to screw them in with a screwdriver. They fit kind of tight anyway, so you may have to use a screwdriver regardless. And then you can put the grounds on each one of those. I'm not sure why they used two different grounds. I mean, you could have ground it all to one screw and been done with it, but it's how it was set up, so that's how we're going to do it, and that's how I've got it in the diagram. So if you have the little inner lock washers, you put those on first, and then the ground, and then the nut. And then I'm going to route this ground around the other ground to kind of take up some of that slack that's in that ground, because there's a lot more wire there than it needs to be. I don't want anything hanging down near the lamp. And then we'll hook it on that other screw. There's your inner lock washer. And then the ground. And then the nut. And then we'll just tighten those down with the driver. And if that screw starts to spin, then you can hold the nut in place and then turn the screw with the screwdriver to tighten it down. Pretty easy. So next we'll install the lamp. That's going to go on the face as well. And then it hangs back towards the wiring side, like I've got it oriented here. It just has one screw. And the power panel itself has two cutouts down there that kind of keep that little L bracket that the lamp base is on from shifting left to right. Once you've got it lined up between them, you can tighten that screw down. Then we've got all the wiring. So if you look at that little wiring diagram that I put up first, and like I said, there's a link in the description where you can go and download a copy of it. It's just a JPEG, but all the whites are going to connect. So we'll start with the whites. And we had to cut a lot of these to disassemble all this, so we're just going to restrip these 3 whites. So you've got one coming off of the lamp, which we just stripped, and now we're stripping the white coming off of the power cord. And then we've got the white coming off of the receptacle. And I would just recommend that you print out that JPEG and then just lay it down on the work surface you're working on, like I have it sitting above, kind of out of the view of the camera. But this is pretty simple wiring. So we twist all 3 of those together, and then we're going to put a butt connector on them. And then we'll crimp that down. And we'll just give each one of those wires a tug, make sure that they're in there good. And next, we're going to be working with the black wires. And if you recall, we cut that power, the black wire coming from the power cable that goes to this butt connector here. So we're going to have to cut that butt connector off and restrip all 3 of these wires. And these are going to the switches that are on the face of the drill press. So you have a red and a black, and then the black coming from the power cord itself. And if you look at the wiring diagram, you'll see that. So I didn't want to do a whole lot of cut footage when it comes to wiring, because I always get questions about, hey, well, where did that wire come from and whatnot. So I'm going to show pretty much all the footage from this wiring part as well as the motor, so that nobody gets confused. So we set that aside, and we're going to come back to it in just a second. So we're just stripping the black from the power cord now, and it's really on there. I didn't eat my Wheaties this morning. All right. Now we'll twist all 3 of those wires together, and then we're going to put a butt connector on them as well. And then we'll crimp it in place. So that is all of the wiring. So now we just need to tidy it up, because we didn't remove the other 2 butt connectors. They're still in place. So we're going to fish all of these wires along the top through that plastic wire restraint, wire, I don't know what you want to call it, restraining clip. Not even sure. It has a name in the parts diagram. And like I said, if that clip is missing, then what I normally do is just drill another hole below the hole that that clip snaps into. And then you can run a zip tie through one hole and then back through and then around all these wires and zip tie them in place. But you see how we're kind of tidying all that up, making sure everything's routed well. And then we'll connect that clip. So we'll set that aside until we're ready to install it inside the head. Those are your 4 connectors that are going to go to the switches, 2 blacks and 2 reds. So this is the motor diagram, and this is the wiring diagram for the motor. And both of these are in the description of the video as well. So I recommend printing both of those out so that you don't get lost in the sauce. And we marked all of these wires beforehand when we disassembled it. But still, it's good to have those diagrams that should help you out. So we've got the terminal bar, which I'm holding in my left hand. And it gets oriented like that inside that end shield. So that switch part, which is the kind of long bar on it, faces in towards the stator because the governor switch activates it. So we're going to go ahead and connect the yellow to the bottom of the T4. And the T4 is that screw that's sticking up on the top side. And then we'll connect the blue coming out of the stator to the bottom of the T1, which is the other screw, where my left index finger is pointing, like that. So both of those wires go on the bottom of it, and everything else goes on the top. So at this point, we can go ahead and we can connect some of those if we want. We're going to reroute that black wire coming from the stator because it goes to the capacitor. And then we've got that loose wire right there that goes to the other terminal on the capacitor, and then the other end of it connects to the terminal bar. So we're going to go ahead and pull the tape off of that because that's the first one we're going to connect once we install the terminal bar inside the end shield. So we're just going to screw the terminal bar in using 2 of the screws. I actually really like this motor because, one, it's really quiet, even though it doesn't have ball bearings. And 2, it's simple because all of the wires are color-coded, and the understanding how everything is laid out is very simple. Emerson did a good job putting this motor together. So once we've got that terminal bar tightened down, make sure that switch is working, we can start fishing all of those wires up towards the top side of the terminal bar. So there's the one coming from the capacitor that we're going to connect first. And it actually goes to the B connector, which is down near T4. And then we've got the red wire that's coming from the stator. And it goes to A, the blade A connector, which is right next to the T1. But there's 2 of them next to that T1, so make sure you're connecting it to the one I'm connecting it to right there. And that should be all of those wires. So the only wires we have left are the wires coming from the power cord itself. So at this point, we can go ahead and mount this end frame or end shield on the stator. And I'm looking for some index marks, but basically you're going to see me pull. I've got a plug inside the oil port right now, and you'll see me pull that plug out. We want that plug facing, right where the two capacitor wires are coming out of the top of the motor. And then we can smack that down. And my head was in the way because I was looking inside those 4 holes that the long screws go in to make sure that I can see all the way through them, through the stator, so that they're lined up properly. So we've got 3 wires coming off of the power cord, a white, a black, and a green. So white is going to go to the T4. It's the other blade terminal on the T4. And the black is going to go to the T1. Like so. And then the green is going to go to that ground screw that it's kind of laying on top of right there. So we just need to pull that screw back out and then put the green in there and then screw it back down. Too easy. So if you follow the wiring diagram that I've got linked for you there in the description, you should have no issues. And it even tells you how to reverse this motor if you need to reverse it. So next we'll just install the terminal cover, and it should be squashing that wire, that power cord, like so. And that's what keeps the power cord from being yanked out of the motor. And then it's got 2 screws to tighten down. And next we're assembling the governor or centrifugal switch. So you've got the 2 governors on each side, and they have to lock into that white plastic piece. They kind of sit around it from the bottom side of it, and then they lock into 2 kind of niches in the brown plastic disc on top. And then they get the springs on each side of them. So if you have to, just go back and watch the disassembly video and you'll see how I took it apart. And it's not difficult, but it may look kind of crazy. So then we'll just shoot some super lube on there. Cover the springs. Make sure everything's functioning. And now we're ready to install the retaining ring. And this is where that exploded view of the motor diagram, I guess, parts diagram that I've got linked in the description. And it'll tell you all of these parts and the order they go in. But if you're missing any of these rubber washers or the plastic washers, I think if you've got enough to put 2 on each end, you'll be good. But if you're missing, let's say, just 1, because there's supposed to be 3 on both ends. So let's say you've got 5. Then put 3 of them on this end, and then put 2 on the other end, which is the situation that I am in. I had an extra rubber washer, but I did not have an extra plastic washer. So it won't make a whole heck of a difference. But if you've got enough to do this end first, then do this end first, and then put at least 1, if not 2, on the other side. Now I'm just going to, this is 5W30 oil, motor oil, and I'm going to squirt some on the shaft because it's going to engage with that bearing that's in the sleeve. So we'll just insert the rotor, make sure it's seated and spins freely. And then we've got the retaining ring for this end. And then we've got the cup washer. And if you didn't notice on the other side, notice how I put the cup washer on. You want it sitting so the cup is facing up towards us. And it's got a little tab that faces down. And then we've got 1 rubber washer. And then another rubber washer because I have no plastic washer for this end. So no big deal. The rotor will center itself inside the motor regardless. But yeah, it is what it is. So again, a little bit of 5W30, and then we can put that end shield on there. Like so. And again, we want that oil port facing towards the 2 wires coming out of the top of the stator. So I'm just looking to make sure both oil ports are facing in the same direction. And then we can tap that end shield down. Or maybe tap it some more. Maybe some more. There you go. And then we can insert the long screws. So they go in from this side. And then the nuts go on the terminal side. And one of them, that one right there, is hitting on a wire right now. So you just got to kind of fish it around and around that wire, and it'll work its way around it. And there you go. Then we can put the nuts on the ends of all 4 of these long screws. And then just use a driver and a screwdriver to tighten all those down. Look at that thing. Looks brand new. And that'll cinch up any slack you had from not seating those end shields. Pretty simple. All right, so now we need to install the capacitor. So we had marked the capacitor when we took all these wires off of it, so we're putting them back on where they were marked. I don't think the capacitor is polarized, but I'm not taking any chances, so I don't know enough about electrical stuff to be able to tell just by looking at it. So there we go. Then we got the capacitor cover. And the capacitor snaps inside that cover. And then we've got the two screws that attach the cover to the stator. And I didn't tighten that bottom one down enough, and it's going to come off of there. So these are actually pretty short screws. I think they're 1/4 of an inch long. Notice the orientation of that stator cover. The angled profile kind of faces back towards the terminal side of the motor. And then we've got the motor frame, and it has, well, you might have to pause the video and go back and look at it as I lift the motor up. There's a left and a right to that, and you want to make sure you have it oriented properly when you put the motor on it. And then we've got the clamps and the screws and the square nuts. If you put the frame on backwards, then the mount points for the motor are going to sit too high, and trying to line it up on the motor mount on the drill press will be a real pain in the butt. So just make sure you've got the frame oriented correctly. So once we've got one side clamped down, then we can clamp the other side down. So sometimes when you've got motors like this that mount to a frame like this, there's a rubber bushing that sits on each one of the ends of the motors, but not in this case. So now we're just going to squirt a little bit of 5W30 in each oil port on the motor. And you don't need a whole lot. Then we're going to put the caps on them. We're going to give that shaft a couple turns. Then we're ready to test this motor. So we'll put a piece of tape on it, see if we can tell which way it's spinning. Power it up, power it down, and listen for the click. So if we heard the click, then we're good to hook. Make sure we're not going to shock ourselves. Make sure it's not getting hot real fast. And we're done with the motor. And that's going to complete this video. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. Don't forget about all the information that's down in the description of the video. If you got any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section. As always, I appreciate the support and any questions you guys have. And I will see you next time.